I am a dairy farmer's daughter from a very small Minnesota town, population 300. And I want you to know I graduated with 18 kids in my class, and most importantly, I was in the top 50%. I know, it was a pretty big deal. These were great years, right, in high school. And now I'm going to have us fast forward to when I was 26 years old, and I was standing on the yard of the farm on which I was raised. And I couldn't breathe. I was so fearful. The house was engulfed in flames. The deputy walked up to me just 2 hours later and told me they had found my brother Mike just 3 feet from the front door. He was 28 years old. And just like that, he was gone. Now I share this because what I have learned since he passed is that all of our experiences in life, all of them, impact us, of course. What I've learned, though, is how it impacted me in how I lived, in how I led, and in how I made my decisions. Because here was the most important thing I learned. It was that our thinking impacts every decision we make. Every decision we make. And it is because our thoughts are what control our emotions. And I've adjusted this to say it's our emotions that control our decisions. And here's also what I've learned is that it is learned. We can learn to do this. We can be in control of those thoughts. Because it's a little bit like wanting milk from the cow, but waiting for the cow to back up to you. You can do that, but it's much better to go to the freaking cow, right? You have a choice here. You have control over your thinking. Because our thoughts control our emotions, and our emotions control our decisions. So what I'm going to do is just share a few thoughts that I've had and tips I've had on how I have made decisions and controlled my thinking. The first is take the deathbed test. What I ask myself is, what would I wish I had done on my deathbed when I'm taking my last breath? What is that I wish I would have done when I look back? And I'll give you an example from a couple years after Mike died. I was standing in the bathroom of our house on a Sunday afternoon curling my hair, and my husband, Steve, walked in. And he said to me, I have a job opportunity, and it's in Sweden. What do you think? Would you like to move to Sweden? As I'm curling my hair, I'm like, what? Crap, I have no desire to travel, like none. I'm a dairy farmer's daughter. When I was 19 years old, I had this big out-of-state trip to the Apple River to float, which it was like the border, 3 hours away, the border of Minnesota and Wisconsin. So I hadn't traveled. Next thought that came to my mind was, Jill, what would you, if you were on your deathbed, what would you wish you would have done? And what's the worst thing that's going to happen if you go? You're going to die? I mean, that became my measuring was, I'm going to die? And you know what? The newsflash here is, none of us get out of this alive. No matter what none of us are going to get out of this alive. So I shifted my thinking. I had the feeling then when I said, I'm going to do this, I was determined. And my decision to Steve was, I said, yes, let's go. New thoughts, new feelings, new decisions. The second thing that I learned then was surround yourself with motors and not anchors. So we had come back from Sweden. It was a couple, 3 years, maybe 4 or 5 years later, I had this idea for Tastefully Simple for this new business. I worked on the business plan for 3 months, running the numbers. And finally I hit a number that I thought, this is doable. I think we can do this. I'm sitting at my computer, and I look at it, and I froze. Because what it said was, in 5 years, the projections were that it could be a $5 million company. I got up, I walked down the hallway of our little, small, ranch-style home, walked to the kitchen, and I stood between the sink and the stove. I reached behind me, and I got a box of graham crackers, and I got a plate of soft butter, and I began buttering one graham cracker after another and shoving it into my face. I know, you guys eat from stress, I can tell. So I'm eating these graham crackers, and the next thought that came to my mind was, Jill, stop. What are you going to do? You can't control here. And I thought, what am I going to do? And I walked over, I picked up the phone, and I called my silent partner. I only had one person who invested at that time, back then in the beginning. And I said to her on the phone, I said, I cannot run an $11 million company. I can't do it. Now, I want to frame this up so you understand. We, my husband and I, had a $25,000 a year household income. And I need you to know that meant annually. Annual, $25,000. So this was a big deal. Her response to me was, Jill, if you can grow an $11 million company, you can run an $11 million company. Even now, I can just feel the relief. And I thought, yes, that's a good point. I can do this. 3 months later, launched the business in a shed, packing orders on a pool table, no running water. In the first 5 years, 4.5 years, we hit sales of $11.8 million. I know, thank you, God. And then within our first 13 years, we hit $143 million in sales. And here's the biggest lesson. If at first you do succeed, try not to look astonished. Okay. So it's about surrounding yourself with motors, not anchors, because they affect our thinking, and our thoughts control our emotions, and our emotions control our decisions. Okay, the next tip is this. Take it 1 minute at a time. It was 2.5 years after I started the business, and I received a call, and eventually I learned my youngest brother, Patrick, 11 years younger than me, died from a fall at a construction site. He was 28 years old. 7 months later, I came home with my son, who was 5 years old, and found my husband, Steve, dead on the bedroom floor. He had died of an overdose of prescription medication. When what I call the survivor fog lifted the day after the funeral, I'm putting Zach to bed, turned out the light, had this thought that crashed into my head, and it was, how are you going to raise your 5-year-old son and keep the company alive? I felt a tsunami of fear just wash over me. And then the next thought I had was, Jill, you can do this, and you're going to do it just 1 day at a time. Again, though, just this unrelenting fear. And here is why. It's because when we have hope for the future, we have power in the present. When we have hope for the future, we have power in the present. And when you're in that kind of crisis, I couldn't even see 24 hours ahead. By the grace of God, the next thought that came into my head was, Jill, just take it 1 minute at a time then. Once again, I thought, I can do that. I can take this 1 minute at a time. New thinking, new feelings, new decisions. The last thing that I'll share with you is this, and it is that it's when we ask ourselves if this is for the greater good. So the company just was on fire, like I said, for the first 13 years. After that, not so much. Year after year after year, sales were down and down and down. Losses, of course, were occurring. We had a massive amount of reserves, so use those reserves to keep the company going. And then the reserves ran dry. I was left with a decision. Do I invest my personal money in the company, or do I shut the door? And I took the deathbed test, and I asked myself, what is it I would wish I had done if I was on my deathbed? Would I think, I should have kept the doors open so we could just try some new strategies? Or would I think, what in the heck, Jill? You threw money down a black hole. don't make the investment. I opted to put money into the company. And during this time frame of the turnaround, we had 3 layoffs in 3 years for a total of 117 people in our company. I will not lie, it was ranked really high on the suckle meter. It was horrible. And I mean, this was our family, right? And here's what got me through, is I thought, and I would say to our leadership team, I said, you know, we are doing this for the greater good to help save the people that are still in the company and our sales force. And we had to get into that mentality, or we could never have gone through the pain. We have to ask ourselves, is it for the best? Is it all for the ultimate good of what's in the end? So those are the 4 tips that I have for you on how we can control our thinking. We can control our thinking with those 4 steps along the way. And I will also add that I could never, ever have had all these experiences I've had in my life absolutely impacted, whether it was Mike's passing or Steve or Pat. I could never have had those experiences I would never have learned how to live differently and how to lead differently and how to make different decisions in my life if I had not had that experience. And I can tell you this, my life is so rich. It is so much richer because of those decisions, whether it was moving to Sweden, whether it was the company with Taste Was Simple. It enriched my life immensely. Our thoughts control our emotions, and our emotions control our decisions, and it is a choice. I appreciate you. Thank you.